Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Jacket Sports Weekly here on WCTV. I'm Caleb Yauger, and today at the desk we've got Austin Bechtold once again joining us for another episode of Jacket Sports Weekly. We got a lot of things to discuss. First of all, we got to start with football, Austin. The team is 2-2. They had the weekend off, currently ranked 5th in the PAC. They suffered the 31-15 loss against Allegheny College a couple of Saturdays ago. But this weekend is homecoming weekend, a chance for a new start, but they've got some tough competition against Carnegie Mellon, who's in the top 25 in the nation.
Yeah, very much so. And Carnegie Mellon, a team that is undefeated, as well as 3-0 in the PAC. You're coming off of a loss against Allegheny that, really wasn't expected. The Yellow Jackets thought that they could go into that game and be able to win, ride some momentum from the W against Geneva as well. Allegheny responded by getting crushed by Washington and Jefferson on the road. So this is going to be tough for Waynesburg, but it is homecoming. There is some emotions that do flare up with homecoming to try to be able to put on a good show for the crowd. And I know that that's not something that's in the minds of the Waynesburg players, but at the same time, a chance to be able to prove yourselves against a very talented team and probably the best team in the PAC.
Absolutely. Waynesburg has the third best scoring offense in the PAC at 33.8 points a game. Carnegie Mellon is at the fourth best offense with 26 points a game, but the scoring defenses are a little bit different. Waynesburg's ranked 7th in the PAC with allowing 30 points a game. Carnegie Mellon, the second best defense behind Westminster, 12.6 points a game. Westminster is just above them at 12.3, so that's really going to be a factor in Saturday's matchup.
Right, and the offense isn't even that great, I would say, for Carnegie Mellon in terms of yardage, but the defense is doing fantastic. 11 interceptions so far for Carnegie Mellon. Tyler Rain's got to be careful to be able to protect the ball, not force it to players like Dakota Romantino, but be able to make plays, especially across the middle of the field, to be able to exploit Carnegie Mellon any way possible. But being able to move the ball offensively is going to be one of the main keys.
Absolutely. And Tyler Raines has done a good job, to his credit, of taking care of the football, not really throwing any picks, but it's going to be important to keep that momentum going into Saturday's contest. Now let's go over to men's soccer. Currently 3-3-4 this season. 4 ties for the men's soccer team. They're ranked 5th in the PAC, but they're coming off against a 2-1 win against Teal College. Even though they were down 1-0, they were still able to manage a win on the road in Greenville, Pennsylvania.
Right, Teal being able to score first, and it's really nice to see Waynesburg be able to respond. And we've seen Michael Francis very strong in net for his sophomore season, and he's been able to provide a spark for the team with critical saves. He had 4 saves in the tie against St. Vincent as well. Being able to keep Waynesburg in games. And we've seen a lot of low-scoring games. The Yellow Jackets, whenever they are able to pull out a victory, like against Teal, a team that is Teal of, okay standards, but the Yellow Jackets men's soccer team, we're going to try to bounce back. And when you're sitting right at 500, that has kind of been the point, Caleb, that this team has been on for really the whole year, just kind of hovering around 500, not being able to exceed it, but also not dropping too far down the standings.
Absolutely. Ben White and Alex Canistraro were the 2 goal scorers in that game between the 60th and 70th minute marks. Yeah. Tyler Moorbacher had 4 shots on the game as well.
Tyler Martin assisted on both of the goals.
Yeah, he's been a key part of this Waynesburg team. Really is a good possessor of the ball and can create opportunities for the Yellow Jackets as well. W&J is up next on the schedule for Waynesburg, who is ranked 2nd in the PAC this Wednesday night. By the way, you can catch that on the Waynesburg University Sports Network at 7:30. Now going over to women's soccer, 3-4-3 on the season. They've got 3 ties as well, 6th in the PAC, but they're coming off a huge win against Teal. They opened up the gate. 5 goals that were unanswered, and they won the game 5-1.
Right, just showing some dominance, and that's kind of what we want to see from this team, and that's what we've seen historically in the past, being able to put the ball into the net and then be able to control possession, but also not allow the opposition to really get many opportunities to do anything with it. And there is a logjam in the standings for women's soccer that you can, with just a couple of wins over the next few games, really move yourself up the standings, especially early on in the season. You don't want to fall too far back behind. If you go, let's say, 1-2-2 or 1-3-2, the difference in those early games are going to play a factor, not necessarily for momentum, but just to be able to build more chemistry and confidence for this team to be able to be at the top of the standings moving forward.
And by the way, in that game, all of those goals were scored by different players. Demery Livingston, Jacinda DeVart, Emily Redmond, Chloe Zook and Brooklyn Loveland all got on the board for Waynesburg on Saturday. A big win for both clubs as women's soccer will take on W&J on Tuesday night for another conference matchup. Going over to volleyball now, 2 wins and 14 losses on the season, second to last place, 10th place in the President's Athletic Conference. They've suffered 8 losses in a row. And Austin, just to give you some statistics, they are last in hitting percentage, assists, kills per set, service aces, and opponent digs.
Right. Whenever I fill out the volleyball program, it's tough to be able to put the losses in there because I know the team is working pretty hard. It's just not working out in terms of results. You're seeing Alexis Marsh, Kayla Stohan, Michaela Boniaga. We saw Boniaga, who's been a passer in the back row for the most part, get some opportunities on the outside. You saw that game on the Waynesburg University Sports Network. Caleb and I had it where Boniaga, who's on the shorter end, I think 5'1", was getting some swings on the outside and was having the best success out of anybody.
Absolutely.
From the outside for the Yellow Jackets. So kudos to her. But it's just not been good for the team with costly errors, missed serves. There's a ton of things that have not gone right, especially in the middle parts of the set. We've seen Waynesburg jump out to either an early lead or be able to keep pace with whoever they're facing. But once you get to like the 15th, 16th, 17th point for either Waynesburg or whoever the opposing team might be, it was Washington and Jefferson on Thursday, the Yellow Jackets have just not been able to put that extra effort to be able to work out the way that they wanted to. Not exactly for a lack of effort, but just a lack of execution, I should say, to be able to get those critical points to get to 25.
The Yellow Jackets have not won a single set since Saturday, September 24th against Bethany, and it's just been that kind of season for Waynesburg. But they have another chance against another conference opponent in Chatham University. They take them on Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. Now going over to tennis, a 9-0 loss at Washington and Jefferson, although Washington and Jefferson is a very solid women's tennis program. Marina Hastings and Haley Sweeney, they lost 8-2 in the doubles matches, and Sweeney was only able to get 1 game in 2 sets for the singles, and Hastings was able to go 6-2 and 6-1. She did suffer the loss in the singles matches, but those two were the best performers from the last matchup against W&J. Some other events going on around campus: Smash Bros, League of Legends, and Rocket League went 3-2 this past week for esports competitions. The esports program doing exceptionally well in its inaugural season, but League of Legends goes Wednesday against Misericordia University, Super Smash Brothers on Friday, and Rocket League against East Stroudsburg University on Friday as well. Going over to golf, men's and women's golf. Men's golf placed 3rd at the St. Vincent Invitational on Thursday, and then the match against Carlow University got postponed for both men's and women's teams, but they're taking on Bethany tomorrow at noon. And finally, the cross-country team homecoming meet this Saturday at 8:30 a.m. A lot of events going on around campus, huh?
Yeah, there is a lot of events, and I want to shout out the esports program because what a job that they've done, Coach Pioch. And one thing that's been talked about a lot over the last couple of weeks is defeating Alabama. I mean, like, a Division I team, a Division I program, historically known in the SEC as for football, basketball, whatever it might be. You know who Alabama is if you're just a college fan, not even just a sports fan. So really exciting for the esports team in their inaugural season to be able to knock off a team like Alabama.
Tyler Zeman is coming to the desk next, and we're going to do something a little bit different, so don't go anywhere. You're watching Jacket Sports Weekly.
You're watching WCTV, where we aim to bring you the best local coverage of what you care about most. Everything from local businesses to hometown sports and the latest weather. We're keeping up to date with what you need to know about issues that affect our campus and our community. We're telling the stories that matter, celebrating our past, our future, and our potential. So tune in for all the latest buzz right here on WCTV Channel 14, Waynesburg.
As I mentioned before, we're going to do something a little bit differently here on Jacket Sports Weekly. We're going to be talking about some Waynesburg tennis. And here to talk about the tennis teams is our analyst, Mr. Tyler Zeman. You've been talking about soccer these past few episodes, but today we're going to talk about some tennis. First, let's start with the women's team. They lost 9-0 at W&J. Talk about the match and some of the players that stuck out in that match as well.
Overall, Caleb, it was a pretty tough matchup for Waynesburg on the tennis courts against W&J. W&J is one of the better teams in the PAC, and they'll be competing towards the top of the conference all season. So for Waynesburg coming in, they already have a smaller roster. They're facing some injuries, so it was a tough matchup, and that's exactly what happened. The two real standouts in this during the day was Haley Sweeney and Maria Hastings. Their doubles team were the only team to take 2 sets from W&J all day, and they still lost 8-2. But they're starting to find their chemistry on the court together on the duos matchup. And for singles, W&J really just dominated all across the boards, and Waynesburg had to forfeit the 6th single, and really that's just because the lack of depth on the roster this year.
Yeah, you mentioned that. Do you think that's part of the reason why the team finds itself in the position that it is right now at 0-3 in the PAC, and also just overall with 1 win at 1-4?
Yeah, I think the numbers really matter, especially in this sport. When you don't have a lot of people, especially to fill all 6 single games, it's going to be tough. You're going to be competing from behind to start with because you have to forfeit the 1 game. So I think that definitely plays a factor into it. And just in practices and stuff, you always want more numbers just so there's always better players. Players will be competing, and it just brings out the best in each other. So with the smaller roster, I think they're starting to find that. It's just going to be a tough season.
Next matchup for the Waynesburg women's tennis team is against Geneva. What are some of the things to keep in mind as they go into this matchup?
Yeah, well, last year, Waynesburg actually didn't perform too bad against Geneva. The score ended 5-4 last year, and they didn't look bad. But again, this year, they lost some players. They don't have that big of a roster, so we'll have to see if they'll be able to compete in all 6 singles matches. But I think they probably will still lose, but I think it'll be a lot closer, and I think this will be a matchup that really can get the confidence back into these girls that have little confidence after not being able to put up any points in PAC play so far.
Are Hastings and Sweeney the 2 players that we should especially keep our eye on, or are there other players on this tennis team that we think could be able to pull out potentially a win?
I think those are going to be the 2 big names coming into the matchup against Geneva. They're both seniors. They're both going to be leaders, and again, they pretty much have the full experience. So those are going to be 2 names that you definitely want to keep an eye on, not just in Geneva, but throughout the entire season. So,
unfortunately, we can't really talk about the men's tennis team because they've had 2 matches that have both been postponed against W&J and St. Vincent College, but last year they did make the playoffs. They lost in the first round to St. Vincent College 7-2. They lost some key seniors in Joey English and Connor Cassidy, a big part of that men's team. They still have Ethan Lown, but the duo of English and Lown will be no longer existent. But when we come back, we're going to be talking about women's soccer with Mr. Colin Rhodes when we come back on Jacket Sports Weekly.
Welcome back to Jacket Sports Weekly. Let's turn our attention to the women's soccer program, and here to do so is our women's soccer expert, Colin Rhodes. Colin, great to be alongside with you. 5-1 the win against Teal for the Yellow Jackets with 16 shots in the game. What did you see that you liked?
Well, first off, I've always been saying Waynesburg needs to take more shots, and that's exactly what they did in this win against Teal. 16 shots, 15 of them were on goal. That is a shot on goal percentage of 94%. That is amazing. That's a lot of shots, a lot of quality shots that I've been wanting them to be doing. And then you see Teal, they only had 7 shots, 2 on goal. So really, Waynesburg just outperformed by far against the Teal Tomcats. Brooklyn Loveland had a goal. Damari Livingstone, Jacinda Devart, Haley Johnson had 3 shots. At most of any player on the team, no goals, but they were all shots on goal, to say the least. And then Chloe Zook and Emily Redmond, they came in as substitutes and both got goals. So some really just a lot of good work by everyone on this team this week.
3-4-3, the record for the women's soccer team so far. Colin, just in the general scheme of things, how big was this win for the soccer team to get on the right track?
It's very much a morale booster, I'll tell you that. Losing 3 straight after a shutout win over Mount Aloysius, and then they get the tie, and then another tie, and then a win. So you see this progression of, okay, trying to figure things out, we're tying now, and now we've got the win. Sure, Teal may not be the best team in the PAC, but when you've been like in the situation like Waynesburg's women's team has been, you take it and you run with it. Any win is a win, and no matter what it looks like.
What do you think has been plaguing this team to the point where there's been so many ties rather than being more victories or even in the worst case, more losses? But the ties, do you think that they're more so of just an even slate, or what do you think that they need to do to be able to get above that?
Well, I think the ties were a bit of an even slate. You saw the game against St. Vincent this past week when I previewed that the last episode. I said it was going to be a close game. They had very similar stats going into it. I initially thought St. Vincent would pull out the victory, but it ended up being a 0-0 tie in the end. I think that really shows just how equal the two teams were. Really, the only difference, though, is that St. Vincent had 21 shots. Waynesburg had 6. So you do see that there is still a discrepancy in the amount of shots Waynesburg takes in each game. I think that is something that's sort of held them back. But sort of picking that up on the defensive side has been their goalkeeping. Kennedy Shook has been in the starting goalkeeper these past 3 games with a 1-0-2 record, really just keeping Waynesburg in those games and getting them the victory in this last one.
The next opponent for Waynesburg is W&J, the team that knocked them out of the playoffs in double overtime last season. What do the Jackets need to do in order to get some revenge on the Presidents?
It's going to be tough, I'll tell you that. What they need to do is just see if they can replicate what they did against Teal. But the problem is Washington and Jefferson is not a team that gives shots to their opponents very easily. Washington and Jefferson has allowed only 9 goals so far this season. But Waynesburg has allowed 17 goals. It's a very big difference. That's just under double of what W&J has given up. And then I mentioned, of course, the shots. Waynesburg doesn't take many shots. W&J doesn't allow many shots. Another thing, though, to consider, Waynesburg is currently getting 9.7 shots a game. Or it's around 12 shots a game last week. That unfortunately went down, especially due to the tie at St. Vincent. WJ, though, is still at 12.2 shots per game. However, I think maybe with this goalie change, you'll see more saves, fewer goals allowed by Waynesburg. I almost hate to see Autumn Blair lose the starting job at goalie because I thought she did really well. But Kennedy Shuck has been showing up as the starter in these past few games.
You touched on some of the changes just a little bit, but what do you think offensively the team needs to do, maybe to create a little bit more movement? Or you mentioned how W&J does not allow a lot of shots. What has to be the deal breaker for Waynesburg, if you will, to be able to counteract that?
I would say use the field. Like, just make quick passes to each side of it, maybe even use the middle. You want to make sure you're keeping the ball away from the defense of Washington and Jefferson. I think it would be a good idea to try and keep the ball moving. You might compare it to basketball, where you keep passing the ball along the court to create shot opportunities. I think that could apply here in soccer as well.
Who are some of the players that have been sticking out to you as of recent? Obviously, Chloe Zook, she scored on Saturday, is one of the leading goal scorers on this team as a freshman. But who are some of the other key contributors for the Waynesburg women's soccer team?
Well, like you said, Zook has been great. She actually was PAC Rookie of the Week last week, which I forgot to mention. So congrats to her. Another player I would say has been really well is Brooklyn Loveland. She's been sort of leading the team in taking shots, and she also scored a goal in that win against Teal. And I would say, I mentioned her before, but Kennedy Shook was really good in these past few games. She's been a big difference maker for this women's soccer team.
So as the season continues to progress, what do you make of what we've seen so far, and what do you think might be the ultimate outcome, at least for the next couple of games, being Washington and Jefferson and Allegheny, for the team to be able to continue to try to build some momentum?
Well, I do like the goalie change as something that'll help them with building that momentum. The W&J game is going to be really tough just because, like I mentioned, the defensive statistics of W&J. Really, though, I think what we saw in Teal, taking in as many shots as they did, that's a great sign for moving forward. I've been saying it all season, basically, is taking those shots. We saw it in Teal. So if they can do it again, I think that's going to be really big.
Well, Colin, we thank you for joining us here today. Always a pleasure to talk to you. We'll stay with soccer, but now turn our attention to the men's side when we return with Micah Leith here on Jacket Sports Weekly.
He said you don't do it again because he messed up the directing.
Yeah, I'll do it.
He said he can do it.
Just from here?
Yeah. Where should he go from?
Should I go from thank you, Colin? Yeah? All right. All right, 3.
Thank you, Colin. Go ahead. Yeah.
All right, 3. Thank you, Colin. Let's stay with soccer and turn our attention to the men's side with Micah Leith coming up next on Jacket Sports Weekly.
Now it's time to talk about the men's soccer team for Waynesburg University here on Jacket Sports Weekly. Micah Leith is joining us at the desk. Thank you very much, Micah, for joining us here on Jacket Sports Weekly. The men's team 3-3-4, and that 4 means 4 ties. Before we get into the match against Teal, just talk about the record so far and what that means for this team.
So yeah, we've seen this team kind of have to battle back a lot this year. They 1-1 tie versus Chatham, a goal in the second half to bring them back to the game. A game against St. Vincent, 1-1 tie there as well. Late goal to bring them back into the game, and then that 2-1 comeback against Teal, as you kind of referenced, having to come back in the second half to win those games. And that's kind of been the way that this Waynesburg team has had to play so far. They've been on the back foot a lot of times entering the second half. But to their credit, they have been a good second half team. A lot of their goals have been scored in the second half. So that's something encouraging that the Jackets can build on moving forward.
So let's talk about Teal a little bit. So 2-1 win. Teal ended up scoring the first goal, but Waynesburg being able to respond and then score the next 2 to be able to pull out the victory. What are your thoughts on how they were able to do so and be able to get a 1-goal win to be able to not tie once again?
I mean, it's always tough when you come into a game and you're down, 1-0 coming into the second half, or really down at all coming into the second half. It puts you on makes you have to be on the front foot going forward in the second half. You really have to find a way to battle back. You can't play maybe as defensively as you'd like. And again, to Waynesburg's credit, they did it. And one big thing that I think is what's helping Waynesburg is they won the set piece battle. They had 8 corner kicks and Teal gave up 16 free kicks. That's 24 set piece opportunities. So when you have that many chances, and again, all those free kicks are going to be in the dangerous part of the field, but when you have those opportunities, you have to take advantage of them. So it's a good indication if a team has that many free chances, they're going to score and win the game eventually.
Yeah, my question for you is, let's take a look at a lot of these ties throughout the season, especially meaning what it means for the conference record. Waynesburg in the standings right now doing okay. You would rather have a win than a tie, but you would rather have a tie than a loss. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, like most soccer tables, it's kind of a point system. It's less wins, ties, and losses. It's 1 point for a tie, 3 for a win, and a tie is good against a better team than you because you're picking up a point where you might have not had one. But on the other end of the stick, tying that can be brutal for a season. Picking up a tie against Chatham. Chatham has not been the best team this year. I believe they're at 3-1 on the season in the conference. You've got to pick up a win against Chatham. Losing those 2 points is going to come back to haunt them later in the season when they're playing some tougher teams where the games are harder. You can't lose easier points like that, and that's going to be a concern moving forward for this team.
So Waynesburg will have a couple chances at wins at home over the next 2 games with W&J and Allegheny. What are you expecting to see from the team in those next games, and what do you think that needs to be the most important factor to be able to pull out a victory?
Well, the Allegheny game, that's a must-win game for Waynesburg. Allegheny's been kind of on the backside of the table so far. That's the game they have to win. W&J, they need to pick up a point. They need to at least tie there, but that's not one of those as much of a must-win game. Really, moving forward, it's just winning in the first half. They cannot afford to, get behind, especially against a team like W&J, who's just going to continue to hound you and push the ball forward, move the ball around you. So they got to come out strong in the first half in both of those games, get goals early on, and try to get that lead and build it as the game progresses.
The last 2 contests against W&J have been decided by 1 goal. And the last win against the Presidents for the Yellow Jackets came on October 19th of 2012 in overtime. But Micah, throughout the season so far, we still have a lot of soccer left to play, but at this point, who have been the key starters or key players to even come off the bench that you've seen perform well for this Yellow Jacket squad?
I mean, clearly the biggest difference maker so far has been the goalkeeper, Michael Frankus. He's had a great year so far. He leads the PAC in saves, which may not necessarily be a factor of his quality of play, which has been outstanding so far, but just how much pressure he's been under. And that's another thing Waynesburg has to pick up on is, keeping the ball off of him, giving him a chance to breathe, really. Another key player, Tyler Moorbacher, leads the team in points with 2 goals, 3 assists. He's really been that guy that can create chances. He's good with the ball at his feet. He's a bigger body on the ball. He doesn't get pushed off very often. He's able to make those quick passes to set up someone else with those assists, as well as turn and shoot as well. Coming off the bench, Tyler Martin, he came off the bench in that 1-1 tie versus St. Vincent after Seth Masadi got that red card, and he came in the first half as well, but coming in the second half, he had those fresh legs. He kind of energized that team and ended up scoring the goal to get them back in the game. He's been a key player coming off the bench. And then again, Samuel Hawkins, he's been one of the best players in this team for the past few years, and he's still producing and really a proven team leader as that senior captain presence on the field.
So what do you expect to see in these next couple of games for Waynesburg? Now, we mentioned who they will be playing. What do you think that the outcome will be, or at least what do you think that the outcome needs to be for the Yellow Jackets to have a fighting chance to be at the top of the standings, or at least close to it?
Well, I kind of referenced it earlier. Allegheny, they need to pick up one against Allegheny. That is a game that they need to get 3 points, and they need to score several goals to kind of boost that goal differential. That's something that maybe is a nitpicky thing to talk about with Teal. Again, 2-1 against Teal. You really need, in a game like that, you need to be looking to score more goals, boost your goal differential, so when you get late in the season as a potential tiebreaker, you have that in your back pocket. Against W&J, they have to come out. They need to win kind of the defensive battle. It's going to be a tight game. Pick up a point at the very least moving forward. But what's actually going to happen, that remains to be seen. This team has been a bit inconsistent at times, haven't really synced on offense. So it's going to be interesting moving forward.
Mr. Leith, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. And we want to thank you for tuning in to another episode of Jacket Sports Weekly. So tune in next week right here on WCTV. Have a great rest of your night.
This has been a production of Waynesburg Community Television.